are on the Pacific and Central Coast time zones, and good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast, like my co-host Mariah. Want to let you know that we are being recorded. I'm Dr. Sangeeta Gupta, and I'd like to welcome you to our DEI Holistic Series. Mariah and I worked together about 12 years ago when we co-founded a diversity and cross-cultural summit here in Southern California. We ran that for 5 years, and our goal really was to create a community of people who are interested in DEI topics and who wanted to learn from each other and support each other. And so we did that for a number of years, and it was very successful, and we're really happy with it. And then life intervened, and we stopped doing that series. But with the current events starting from last year, Mariah and I were in conversation again about what can we do about this, because this was something that was really important to us. And so we came up with this idea of having these monthly speaker series. And our goal behind it is to go back to our original thought about DEI, which is that we really approached it from a very holistic point of view. It's not just about race or about gender. It's about all the different aspects and dimensions of who we are as people. And so that was our first goal. And our second goal was to look at it from not just a corporate point of view, but also from nonprofit point of view, from organizational point of view, who we are in the community. So address all different aspects of who we are as people and how DEI impacts all aspects of our lives. So at this time, I'd like to introduce my co-host and co-founder, Mariah Hayden. And Mariah, can you speak to a few minutes as to why you feel this is so important?
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Much of what Sangeeta said is our hope is to create a community. A lot of times this is, can you not hear me, sir? Tony? Can you hear me okay, Sangeeta? I thought he said he
hear you.
Okay, sorry, excuse the interruption. So a lot of times these types of conversations are like corporate trainings or sort of formal settings, and we kind of want to take the formality out of it. We want it to be an authentic discussion where people can really ask questions that they don't feel that there's a safe context to ask, to share ideas, to kind of have a support group in trying to figure out how to be responsible equity leaders, all of us, no matter where we're from, what we look like, what we do. That's one of my goals for this series. Another goal for this series is, again, these conversations aren't just affecting us at work. They're affecting us at church. They're affecting us around the dinner table. They're affecting us in our relationships with our neighbors and our relationships with our children. And so if we can kind of come together and look at it holistically in all the areas, equity, race, all these things are affecting us, we think that we might be able to get toward solving it and having real resources and tools if we understand how it connects all together and can have a safe conversation around that. So that's my goal, Sangeeta and I's goal. Welcome again. We're very proud. This is our, fifth month we're doing this, or fourth month? If you have any questions, use the chat room. Sangeeta will tell you more about the logistics for today. And again, you are being recorded.
Thank you, Mariah. So we do have a chat feature, so please feel free to chat, send a message to Mariah through chat if you have a question or anything that you want to ask. We just ask that especially while Elizabeth is speaking, that everyone be on mute to make sure that there's no background noise. There will be 2 breakout sessions where we'll send you guys off into smaller groups where there'll be a question that we're going to ask you to talk about amongst yourselves, and then come back and share your thoughts with the rest of the group. So this is how we want to try and get as much information flowing and perspective flowing as we possibly can. So I'm going to go ahead and start. I've worked with companies and nonprofits of all different sizes, and the thing that sets successful DEI efforts apart is having a game plan, knowing where you're starting from, knowing where you're going, and you have to be strategic in your efforts. I got involved with BSA last summer after they made this very expansive announcement about DEI and what they were planning on doing about it moving forward. So I was very intrigued by the new direction that BSA was planning, and I volunteered to help BSA with their journey. And I want to let you know, I do actually have a personal interest in BSA, as I have 2 scouts in the program, a boy and a girl, and my husband and I are both heavily involved in our local troop. I've had the opportunity to work firsthand with Elizabeth, and through all of this work, her very passionate commitment to DEI comes through in everything that she does. It is quite the task to take an organization of about 2 million youth, volunteers, and paid professionals steer them in another direction. It's kind of like trying to move the Titanic in another direction. So we invited her to speak as part of our goal of creating a learning community. We wanted Elizabeth to share BSA's journey in the hopes that you might pick up some tips, and also that BSA might benefit from any suggestions and ideas that you may have. So at this time, I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Elizabeth Ramirez-Washka. Elizabeth is the Vice President of Diversity Inclusion, and she is also the Associate General Counsel for Labor and Employment for Boy Scouts of America, so on the national level. She leads all BSA diversity and inclusion initiatives and provides legal advice on employee relations issues to both the national office and to local councils. She's a founding member of the Listos Workforce Resource Group and an active member of RISE. Prior to joining BSA, Elizabeth was an employment attorney at Keurig Dr. Pepper and Tenant Healthcare, handling employment and labor matters as well as union negotiations and campaign. She spent the early part of her career as a trial attorney with the National Labor Relations Board and a criminal prosecutor at the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office. So at this point, I would like to welcome Elizabeth to our meeting today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Mariah and Sangeeta. I'm really excited.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Now I can.
Thanks, everyone. So bear with me. Sometimes I have technical challenges, but I'm excited to be here. I'm honored. I see there's volunteers here. So some of the PowerPoint's going to be guided towards giving education towards who the Boy Scouts is. So let me start. Let me share the screen. So we can start. Okay. All right. So for me, it's always helpful to see an agenda. What are we trying to do? And kind of guide you of who the BSA is. Talk about our mission and vision with regards to diversity, equity, inclusion, our why. We're going to have a breakout session, as I told you earlier, and then our strategic approach, how we're looking at things, and the challenges that I've seen as a chief diversity officer. So this is a good roadmap. And then what I want to start with is just this quote, and it resonates with me because you talk about diversity, inclusion, belonging. But the bottom line is, when I look at this, is that we all as human beings, it's innate. We want to feel loved, respected, and included. And that's what diversity, equity, inclusion is about. It's a belonging of being part of of an organization, of anything. And so I think that's what we're all striving for. So I thought we'd start off with this. And looking at our tenets, Scout Oath, this is a foundation of who we are. We talk about honor, help other people at all times, keep myself physically strong. And then the Scout Law. Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful. So this is basically, when you look at this, it helps you understand how you should conduct yourself and treat others. That's the whole tenet of it. But Scout is just not about an outdoors program or people wearing uniforms. What it's about is a program that basically educates 5 to 20-year-old, anyone from their age range from 5 to 20 years old, talks about leadership, service, you have your outdoor skills and values. And remember, this is key in an organization. My daughters weren't allowed to be in scouting because females weren't allowed back then, until more recently. I have college-age daughters, but teaching the values, reinforcing that of what is valued, being trustworthy, friendly, cheerful, brave. Those are things where even in sports, unless you have a very good coach, that are not taught to our youth. And that's something where the BSA strives and really does a very nice job of doing that. It reinforces the values. So if you look at that, who we are, now we're an organization with lots of tradition. And so Sangeeta stated in June, just like other organizations with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, we looked at it and said, yes, we've been doing efforts on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but what more can we do? Let's review what we need to be done. And we made some commitments in June, as many of you have seen. And basically, at that time, a month later in July, I was appointed as the first Hispanic chief diversity officer. And that's a big change in the organization. Understand that this organization has embraced me. I have no scouting background. My daughters weren't involved in scouting because they weren't allowed to be in scouting at that time. And I was the first Hispanic woman in the management team, along with 3 other women. So this is a change we're looking at and trying to see what can we do to be diverse, inclusive, equitable, and just a sense of belonging. And again, as Sangeeta said, we're a volunteer organization, not a corporation. So that's another issue you look at is as volunteers, you choose to be in this organization. As we make changes, we're all seeing this is a volatile subject when people talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and what we're trying to do. So corporations can mandate. The Boy Scouts can do something to sort of a mandate, but you still need to have buy-in, like where are we trying to go with this? And our commitment. So what I can say about that is we have a commitment. You can phrase it any way you want, but the bottom line is you have to have actions, and that's what I'm tasked to do. It's been frustrating in my journey. This is a journey for me as a chief diversity officer, because as an attorney, I'm used to saying, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. But with over 1 million volunteers and youth, we have to look at things and say, what are we trying to do? How are we going to get there? And being patient to make sure we say, this is a journey. So it's something that I tell people, we're on a journey. It's not going to happen overnight, but the journey that not only BSA, but every family, organization, corporations are dealing with this. What are we trying to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion? There's not a one size fits all answer. And then our why. It's being prepared. So for a lot of you, this is common to you, but for people who are not familiar with scouting, our scouts are our youth. They make a commitment under the Scout Oath and Law. We have employees. We have employees in our corporate offices here in Irving, Texas. There's about 1,000. And then we have employees that aren't our employees, but work for local councils. There's about 250. So think of McDonald's franchisor relationship. And then you have our volunteers. Without our volunteers, this organization would not exist. It's based on our volunteers who dedicate their time and effort to these programs, are leaders in this. So what I can say is during my time as a chief diversity officer, volunteers like Sangeeta, Hansley is on the call, you all have put time and effort and taken time to help me as we go through this journey of what's going to work, not work, what you're seeing. And that is so insightful. But it's really important that everyone understand, be prepared for life. That's what we're trying to do with our strategy too. And we've had our mishaps. We've had different strategies over the past 10 years on and off. But as we look at it, it's reviving and looking at what do we want to do and looking at our volunteers, our employees, and our scouts.
So at this time, we're going to have our first breakout session. So we're going to be sending you off for about 10 minutes into groups of about 4 or 5. If you could please select a speaker for your group and then talk about what makes you feel included, respected, and appreciated. Where can you truly be yourself and have your voice listened to and valued? So Mariah, if you can go ahead and send everyone off to their breakout sessions. Welcome back, everyone. If you could please mute yourself. We're going to go ahead and just start debriefing. So since you've selected speakers for your group, who would like to start? If you can go ahead and unmute yourself. So the question was, what makes you feel included, respected, and appreciated, where you can truly be yourself and have your voice listened to and valued?
Hi, everyone. My name is Darren Gran Perez, and I had the honor to be in the group with Christina, Hans, Sherilyn, and Cynthia, and they are encouraged to jump in as I present as well.
Thank you for leading the way, Doctor.
And so we were talking about, we had a really great example of the platinum rule, right? So we know the golden rule was treat others how you want to be treated, but the platinum rule now is treat others how they want to be treated. And Hans, gave a really, really great example of bringing that to light and being in a diverse group versus being in a homogenous group, where people don't really understand or can put themselves in their shoes. And so we came from an empathetic lens with that. And then having a group that is diverse can really understand others' perspectives. And so that was the first part of the question. And then when we kind of went into the second part of the question, we were talking about how, where leadership is where leadership values your voices, where we're bringing voices up, having the opportunity to hear other perspectives, and people that we can relate to with our own personal experiences, is where we can feel is the where part of that question. And as well as, I like the way Christina put it, she was talking about street smarts and like the survivor thrive component of that. So how did I do, group? Thumbs up for my group. Perfect, thank you.
Nailed it.
You did great, Doc.
You did awesome. Great work.
Great. So could we have another group tell us what they talked about?
I can talk about our group. It included Cindy, Natalia, and Richard. And I think we didn't really have an idea how much time we have. We probably should have asked that question. We kind of introduced ourselves first, but we really talked about how you feel included, respected, and appreciated, and that is to have a voice, have it listened to, and have your viewpoint respected, and feel that you have your viewpoint respected. And so that a lot of times you're in a situation, and even if you voice it, but you're not having any feedback or anything coming back to you, that you certainly don't feel like you have a place. We're all involved at scouting in some level, and so we find that we talked a little bit though about in order to have that voice and feel included, they have to be at the table, and so we got talking a little bit about how at the local level, council level, do we bring people to the table, and how difficult that is with scouting traditions and other things. And so we were kind of on that subject matter towards the end.
Okay. Does anyone else from this group want to chime in? Can we have our next group give their thoughts?
Okay, I'll jump in. In my group, there was Rick, Tony, and Christian. And one of the things that stood out to me, well, first of all, two of the gentlemen have been in scouting for a very long time, which speaks volumes to the strength of the tradition and how they value that. And in both cases, their personal experience is something that reinforced in the value of diversity, equity, inclusion, because of being exposed to different kinds of people. In fact, all three gentlemen I was talking to, part of their experience in life, whether it's travel in the military or travel based on family, obligations, or being part of a diverse Boy Scout council, Scout council at that level. All of that personal experience really culminated in that value, to see that value of diversity and inclusion, and it to reach out to others. One of the things, having your voice heard is important. Being an effective part of the group is a way to know that you're valued. Reaching out to others is the first step in having them reach back. So that was, I thought I like that quote and I like that approach. So that is something that, again, to have that courage and that confidence to reach out, and also something, one quote in particular, one of the gentlemen is involved with Scouts with Special Needs, and he's just, the quote was, special needs don't know any particular race, color, or religion. You meet people where they are and accept them for who they are, not what they are. I love that.
I really like those two things that you said, Linda. One, meet people where they are, because we're all on a journey, right, and we're all sometimes at different places on that journey. But if you can meet people where they are, then you can really relate to and try and understand where they're coming from, their perspective, and it can enlarge your own perspective. And then the second thing that I really liked what you said was about reaching out to people. So it's not enough to just create an environment of inclusion within our own group, but actually reaching beyond our group to other people and trying bringing them in really is, it goes to the whole concept of allyship and how you go that one step further and really try and create a larger circle of inclusion, instead of just staying within your own smaller circle of inclusion. So I really like both of those thoughts. Thank you for sharing that. And then do we have another group that wants to share? Was that our last group? Anyone feel free to unmute yourself and let's have a larger conversation. What do you think about what was said? How can we take it one step further?
If I may, I would say that a lot of the responsibility lies on the leadership to avoid conformity, to enhance and uplift diverse voices. I think, unfortunately, it's inherent for us to be tribal and to seek similarities and push out differences more quickly than we are to accept those differences. And it's important for leaders in every vessel, in every department, in every position to be the vein that connects these concepts, because as soon as one department falls, then another one is susceptible to being without that, living in that vacuum and allowing others to be sucked into that, linear thinking.
I think, Christina, to that point, so much of this does fall on the leadership of an organization, to kind of, number one, make it okay. Number two, I think for the leader to be fallible, for the leader to share stories on how they've made mistakes, how they don't get it, how they put their foot in their mouth, how they're on a journey too. Or if you're a Caucasian leader, acknowledging, I have privilege and I keep trying to check myself and understand, just sharing your story, sharing your mistakes, I think sets the tone from the top down for others to do the same. But just like you said, we're human. With human nature, we're tribal. We want to go where we're comfortable, number one. But the second part of human nature is fight or fight, and we've taken that to mean if we're wrong, if we make a mistake as humans, we have to pretend that we don't. And I think if we can, maybe allow, it's okay that we made mistakes. Let's learn from them and move forward. It makes all of this a little bit easier from a leadership perspective.
Yeah, in terms of scouting, it can even be more challenging because scouting has a rather unique organizational structure compared to a lot of organizations, and that it's professionally driven. There's a professional staff there, but it is also, it's volunteer driven. The volunteers actually drive the organization, and it's professionally supported by that professional staff. So leadership can be kind of convoluted. You've got professional leadership, you have volunteer leadership. They're not always in sync, as Elizabeth probably knows very well. And I think that can be a challenge. And along with that, you mentioned tribalism, and unfortunately, scouting can be somewhat cliquish, depending on where you are. For example, if you're on the West Coast, and you're dealing with a situation with the East Coast, you might be looked at kind of funny, and vice versa. So,
well, that's an excellent point, that there's like different cultural subcultures that you kind of have to be aware of and understand language. And I apologize. But I think going to what my original idea was, that every person is a leader in whatever, even a volunteer that is in a leadership role is creating some sort of atmosphere to allow more diverse voices to be more welcomed. And I, as someone who was a volunteer lead, I know that if I, as a volunteer lead, can bring those even like younger leads up, then that only is going to be a stronger pipeline in the future for the organization to grow even faster, because they're going to be able to take somebody who goes to their summer camp or who volunteers for a day or does something like that.
I think also what was mentioned, that there's such a difference between a volunteer supported organization versus corporate, is that I don't say you don't have the teeth to make a mandate, but there's always this fear of, if we push too hard, our volunteers are going to quit. Or if we push too hard, this unit is going to fail. Or I don't want to wave the LGBTQ flag, or I don't want to wave the physically diverse ability challenge because, hey, we go to Philmont every summer. I don't want to be now limited because now I have a youth that is a wheelchair user. Or so having tools and having support at the national level is great, but brainstorming on ideas of how to break through those stereotypes or those biases to make sure we can have all of our youth doing what we want to support our mission, but also having the tools to say, I understand this is uncomfortable to you. And growth always happens in an uncomfortable place, right? You usually don't have the two together. So let's admit that this is uncomfortable. Let's all evolve together, or we're not going to succeed as a whole. And I think that is a huge struggle in the difference between that corporate versus volunteer supported organizations.
Part of what I'm hearing here, one of the first points that came through loud and clear is leaders lead by example.
Mm-hmm.
And that example needs to include openness, understanding, and the willingness to collaborate with others of different opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Because the solution very rarely is found in a straight line. And flexibility to be willing to move in that direction is critical.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
And I can tell you what's sad, and where I can see it as I was the employment attorney before I took this role, is it's sad when legal has to step in to say, this is why you need to do it. And that's where the mandate comes. So as Natalia said, and I've dealt with Tony, is that people with the volunteer organizations not feeling comfortable, not having the tools. And that's something that I know Hansley, Tony, I've worked with you and Sangeeta, looking at the different things that we can do and not ignoring the problem. And that's something where I'm wanting to take head on. I did it as the employment attorney, but I didn't see everything. It was frustrating for me to say, how do you not understand how to deal with someone in a wheelchair and thinking outside the box and working with them and not being afraid and asking the questions? Or how do you deal with, a Latina that doesn't speak, her parents don't speak English? What do you do with that? Not feeling uncomfortable and getting them set. So it's something that I've been doing as the employment attorney, as a chief diversity officer. It's what we need to be doing with volunteers. So it is a struggle I see in the organization, something that was different for me, seeing how volunteers view things versus in a corporate setting. It's more of a mandate. I have teeth up to a point, but not really. We can revoke your membership, which means you can't be part of the Boy Scouts, but at the end of the day, the bad behavior will occur. It's after the fact that I see it. So it's trying to manage the youth, the adults, to say, where are we trying to go? This is for the youth to be in an open, protected environment so they can be who they are.
So this is Paul. I'm not sure what I missed, because I apologize. My computer froze, so I had to log back in. But much of what Tony kind of highlighted, I resonates in terms of the respect. Fundamentally, it's the respect, and because, as Rick said, we're a volunteer-led organization, professionally guided. The tools that Elizabeth is saying, that's what I think really will help. Tools that online training that everyone can access, and in nugget, maybe module form, but to highlight what it means to respect one another. Or so one of the things that from a corporate standpoint that I found very valuable from a manager standpoint, and that would translate well in a volunteer interaction, that I think is not widely understood, are things like microaggression, things that people do when they interact with one another that just, subconsciously shows how disengaged they are, or how much they do not value the opinions of the person, they're interacting with. And so things like that, I think, can set BSA apart if we educate all the volunteers, treating them like an employee at a corporate, whether we can mandate it or not. Let's at least provide the training, the tools, mm-hmm. and then encourage one another to leverage or reinforce the need to take those trainings access those tools that are made available on a nationwide scale.
I agree with you, Paul. I think part of it in this organization is a matter of education. Whether we include it in part of our training, our Scoutmaster training, or however, but it's got to move down to that local level. I was very happy to see in these new territories that there is a committee lead for that, because it's never been. It was always, the last 10 years it's been there at the national level, but it's never moved down. There's been no real recognition of it at the region and areas, and there certainly isn't at most councils. And, I've worked with Tony May, in our area and trying to, create a position in every council for disability awareness. But we really need the diversity position, I think, in every council. If you don't have someone there pushing, to include everyone and give everyone a voice, it's not going to happen.
Elizabeth, do you want to speak to that for a moment? Because I think the plan is to have a DEI committee member at each council.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, there is. So we have the national service territories. It'll be rolling out under our new organization. Well, there will be every territory will have a DEI person, and then from there, the local councils are tasked with having a DEI person to represent that. So this is new and different, and that will help resonate to make sure people understand. I think for me, and Sangeeta is looking at this too, is resonating what's working and what's not working. I think that's the out of touch mode where, as a chief diversity officer, we kind of think high level, what I saw before me, the people before me. I've been on the ground and seen what's been going on. I'm not as close to it now since I've been in this position a year, but yes, we have made space for that territory. It's important, and we're going to be moving forward looking at DEI, making sure it resonates with the local councils.
Yeah, for those of you in California, just to know, Sangeeta is going to be the DEI lead for NST3. So.
And it's my privilege to do so. So it's going to be a lot of things coming. And just on a side note, please feel free to reach out if you have concerns. But I think this is, Elizabeth and I were talking yesterday, and I think this is a great conversation that we're having about a volunteer-led organization versus a corporate organization. But one of the things to keep in mind is that just like we have youth protection training, which every adult is required to take if you're going to interact with the youth, that sets guidelines for behaviors. There is nothing that says we can't set guidelines for behavior as far as DEI overall is concerned as well. So just like we have those expectations for youth protection, it's just expanding the definition of youth protection to make sure that we are being inclusive and respectful and welcoming to diverse Scouts as well. So I know, for example, my daughter is in Scouts. She's a Girl Scout as well. And she's in Scouts and has been for about a year and a half now, and she just loves it. And our Scoutmaster has made a point of making sure that the girls troop is as welcome and is as involved and has the same opportunities that the boys troop has. So I think it's a matter of just expanding that definition and making sure that we all as adults work together to create that environment, because we all have an individual responsibility as well. So, for me, DEI responsibility comes at the individual level, at the leader level, as a team level, and at the corporate level. So for Elizabeth being, the leader of the DEI initiative, and then being at the corporate level, she can set policy, but it's also up to us as individuals at the local levels to make sure that we're walking that same walk and we're being role models at our local levels.
So speaking to that, Sangeeta, one of the things that I've raised when we had the National Key 3 kind of making their tour around the country was that I think we need to revisit the whole idea of a boy troop and a girl troop separated. It really needs to be integrated, and I understand some of the drivers behind that, but to say that they need to be separate just doesn't recognize the kind of equality, and you're reinforcing certain segregations that are historically existing within BSA in terms of prejudice, and by giving that option, you are at least giving the opportunity for units that are prepared to have a co-ed environment, a truly integrated, everyone equal, subject to safety guardrails, but all scouts being scouts and gender not being an issue. I think that will go a long ways to show the outside community, our level of commitment to kind of creating an inclusive environment.
We lost you. Can you guys hear him?
Yeah,
no, I can hear him.
Here.
Yeah, I could hear him fine. Paul, this is Nat again. That's so wonderful to hear. I'm actually in Northeast PA, so maybe not as traditionally embracing new ideas as other parts of the country. And I've faced the other side of it, and I've trained my girls to answer with Ellie's 4, 5, 6 of, friendly, courteous, and kind, because they have personally had biases and aggressions put to them at camp by other scouters. I mean, external people we can't, or having, known camps or known councils to say this is the only week girls can come in because we can't control our bathroom situations, where it could be, addressed with additional porta potties or, whatever you can bring. And it's been a challenge for these girls. I was actually part of a all-girl camporee where we actually had discussions with all of these brand new, newly minted BSA young women, and hearing from them, hearing from their voices, their concerns, which is really where that goes to that sense of representation. Let's hear it from their mouths, what they've faced, to have, an adult scouter say, oh, you shouldn't be here, why don't you go sell some cookies? Or I don't want to work with this young lady. I'm not going to be a merit badge counselor because I don't want to deal with girls, or things that go through that, which send a ripple effect counter to what we're hearing from national. So I'm really excited to hear, any tools that we can use to help, break these stereotypes and, move forward. Even if it's, we don't want to let the girls use our tents that we have. I mean, so those minor things that we can go through to change is going to be, it's going to take time. And then we also have, the charter organization role in scouting, which, sometimes it's as simple as changing a unit.
So does everybody know the definition of ethnocentrism, or what being ethnocentric is? No? Some don't. So that's kind of a practical definition. It's a big word. It's a college word, ethnocentric, but the definition is what's more important here. And I wonder if there's a way, as the scouts were awarded their merit badge for whatever you're going to call this sort of leadership training for them. But one of the things for them to learn is that as human natures, number one, I was said earlier, it's our nature to want to kind of, tribe out or group out, but teaching them what happens when we do that it separates us, you know what I mean? Which is not what Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts are trying to do. We're trying to be synergistic, to see how we can be better together, you know what I mean? And then understanding what being ethnocentric means. So for those on the call who don't know what it means, ethnocentric is the idea or the belief that the way you do things is the right way. Right. And it's like the root seed of all racial issues or gender issues, or really all issues. And it's a funny example would be, so how many of you think that the toilet paper should go over the top, right? How many of you think the toilet paper can go under the bottom? And how many of you don't care just as long as there's toilet paper in the bathroom, right? So there's massive wars in households about the right way to put toilet paper on. And that's a funny example, but it's an example of being ethnocentric, in that if you think this is the right way to do the toilet paper, you really, honestly, truly, in your soul, think everybody else is wrong because they don't have the same belief as you. about toilet paper. Now that's a benign example, but obviously there's other examples in life that, you know, the Girl Scouts should be baking cookies or this or that or the other, whatever your idea is, whatever the way that you do things is, you honestly believe that's the right answer. And if all of us checked ourselves and we're able to say, okay, I'm not right, you're not wrong, we're just different, that's a practical way going forward with a lot of these issues I'm hearing today. We have to teach our youth and we have to teach ourselves that being different is okay. We're very caught up on being right and wrong, because that's the way I was raised to do it. You know what I mean? Which is just a way of making you self-righteous.
Yeah, and I think that's where the territories will help with different leads, different perspectives of what's working in the West Coast versus the Northeast, what the issues are, what we're seeing, and how we change. I think one of the things I've seen is volunteers haven't had access or different perspectives of what's going on, what's not. It's what I've seen is the redcoats, the old scouters that do it their way. We've been doing it for 100 years, and we're going to continue to do it for 100 years. One of the benefits of having someone like me is I didn't come from scouting. So I'm always asked the question, why? Why are we doing it that way? Just because we always have. To your point, Paul, that may have made sense when we did it in 2018, 2019. It's reviewing it and saying, what's going to work now? You know, as Tony pushes on me all the time about disabilities, what's the best way to get the word out there? How can we educate people? But I would remind everyone, and I think we are not the organization we used to be. We're not a wealthy nonprofit. We're a nonprofit that's fighting for their life in bankruptcy, that's going to come out looking a lot differently than we ever have. So it's also resetting expectations with certain volunteers of what can and can't be done and prioritized. And that's where I look to you all, and I look to everyone, as feedback is golden. I appreciate the feedback. I've had discussions with many of you of when you say, what about this? What about that? Also understand there will be more changes as we look at things. How we do one thing, I think what I've seen in the Boy Scouts is if we do a merit badge, it looks like that for 15 years. That doesn't mean that's how things are going to continue to look. It's being more resilient, being more open, and not being focused of we've always done it this way. So.
Absolutely.
Actually, Elizabeth, you opened a little bit of a can of worms there. I could say I resemble one of those red jackets, but I also think calling someone a red jacket is also very pre-decisional, because there are those who wear red jackets that cover the entire spectrum of what we're talking about.
Of course, I agree. No different than Hispanics.
Yeah. On top of that, I chaired the National Disability Awareness Committee for 8 years, and at one point they moved our committee out of program and into diversity. And I'll tell you the experience I saw there. We have a microcosm on this call right now, because there are Heinz 57, pardon me, Heinz, varieties of ways to look at people.
Right.
I mean, and the challenge is, how do you make ketchup from that? Or do we want to make ketchup from that? Again, and I think you're absolutely right. I've heard this from several people here. Respecting others for the value they bring to the table, and being willing and flexible enough to say, hey, there's more than one way to accomplish this. You know, using Mariah's example of the toilet paper.
Right.
Yeah, I like mine one way, but you know what? It can go either way. Hey, I don't mind if the thing is sitting on the top of the toilet and I have to grab it and use it. But
Started here.
In all seriousness,
but
I mean, the challenge we face is that we have to find ways to accept more than just one viewpoint.
Well, I think our culture teaches us that we have to pick this or this. It has to be black or white. Our political system says we have to do that. Our media system says we have to do that. And that's actually manipulative. In most situations, there's a shade of gray. There's all of the above. There's multiple answers. And we need to teach our kids that. And we need to break the system paradigm and say, no, there's multiple right answers, and that's okay. It's a really basic level of giving people options.
Yeah. And I think, Tony, you're right. I mean, that's part of who we are. Even as a minority, I still have my own stereotyping, generalizing. So we all have our biases. And that's something where we're open to it. Like, I don't react and say you're wrong. You don't react and say you're, it's like being open to, did you see how you sound? And I think that's part where people aren't used to the conversation of engaging and say, do you hear how you sound? And I'm like, oh, so I think what I'm excited about is we're in an organization with volunteers like you who are here that we want to make changes. Change is slow because we have this tradition, but we are going to get there. I think how the territories are being looked at, and how we're going to do things. We're at a cusp. We have a CEO that's committed to it. It's put me in this position where I don't know all of the volunteers. So I don't have any alliances to anyone. What I have alliances is to our Scout Oath Law and understanding what's the best for the Boy Scouts. What's the best as I hear feedback from volunteers that reach out to me that want to know, hey, did you realize this or that? And so we're in a time where we can make that change. I'm excited. We're part of what everyone's doing in corporations, families, and how we're evaluating what can we do and how can we make a difference and be respectful and have people be included, especially the youth. These youth are our leaders. And I know I'm looking at the time, but I was really inspired when I had, we've been doing this organically for a long time. And I saw an article, we have Scouting Wire, it's an internal newsletter for the Boy Scouting membership. And Noah Harris, who is a Black Eagle Scout, who's in his mid-20s, before the whole DEIB was pushed out, he is an example of people, volunteers who committed themselves. He is the first Black student at Harvard to be a president. He attributes his success to scouting. It's not DEIB initiatives, and when you talk to him, he talks about being a leader. And part of being a leader, what he learned from scouting is he opens his mind and listens to different views, is that he wants to create a diverse environment at Harvard, make it feel welcoming. But he attributes his success to Harvard. And here's something we've done organically, and we can even get better at it and really rise to another level, expose more children to it, to the youth. And that's what inspires me. It inspires all of you as volunteers to do the right thing, because I have young college age children. I want them to be in a world where they don't see, they don't see color the way I do, but we all have experienced some type of discrimination or bias, to what Tony's saying, whatever we are. So it's just being aware. And that's what inspires me to do what I do. Some days are harder than others. But that's what it is. It's about the youth, the future leaders, and making a change. And that's what inspires me. And speaking to Hans, Sangeeta, different people on this phone that I've dealt with, and Tony, is making sure we're doing that. I mean, just because you have a disability, I get frustrated when I have to be the person. There's not the tools. Why is the employment attorney telling people how to do things? It's let's use our common sense, our gut, and be respectful and value each other's differences.
Absolutely. And at this time, Elizabeth, I'd like to take you back to your presentation. Because this was a great discussion. I'm really glad we had the opportunity to have the discussion, but I know there's some few things that you want to share. So if everyone could please mute themselves, and Elizabeth is going to go back to and finish up her presentation.
So, when we look at the strategic approach, and not every volunteer has seen this. And one of my goals is to get out there and speak more to the volunteers through the territories and have more individual conversations with you as volunteers, to speak from the diversity standpoint, not be in a meeting with 18 other subjects, but just talk about diversity and have these kind of conversations we're having now, is looking at the data and focusing on our scouts, our employees, our volunteers, because our employees count too, and having a diverse group of people and basically serving more youth from different abilities, backgrounds. So here's a high level. We look at strategic goals and commitments, so you can kind of get an idea. Is just embracing diversity throughout our organization. I think that's key to understand where we're trying to go. The merit badge is going to help with the youth to bring in awareness. It's not going to resolve every issue, but it's a start. Looking at our employees, that our employees represent the population. Right now, they don't. Our employees do not look the way our population looks. Understanding that our program has a presence, that it's addressing every child, from disabilities, from the Latinos, from the Blacks, from the Asians. So it's representative. So not all pictures or certain words are not being used appropriately. We're not translating. We need to be looking at how can we meet the needs of what our population is. Right now we're not there yet. And again, it's this culture of inclusion and belonging. I've been fortunate, and in this organization has been inclusive to me. I don't know a lot about scouting. I attended Wood Badge, which is a program to indoctrinate you to understand how it works. Everyone has been very good to me. And so I have not seen some of the issues that, Natalia raised, but what I can say, I'm not saying they're not there, but it's just understanding and just kind of branding who we are so people know what scouting does. It's not just an outdoor program. We do a lot of good. And then, one thing I always look at is our workforce resource groups. That's something that we haven't done a good job. We do have an LGBTQ plus workforce. We have a women's workforce. We need to look at our employees because they're on the ground along with the volunteers. Volunteers are doing some heavy lifting. Don't get me wrong, but so are the employees. And they're committed to this organization as well as the volunteers, is using these workforce groups. And I call them workforce groups because, like I said, they're not all employees of the national office. They belong to the local councils, which are independent. But understanding, mentoring them, growing them so they can attract more people, youth and volunteers to say, this is what scouting is about, but also get their feedback and make them feel empowered to say, how does the merit badge look, the training? So these are the groups we have. For now, they're just within the employee workforce group, what we have. This doesn't mean as volunteers, we can look to not have groups in the volunteer situation when we look at that. Of what can volunteers do as we try to be more aligned. So we have a breakout, but I think we kind of missed that through this. So I just wanted to kind of give you my learnings, who I am, what I'm seeing. It's like there's not a one size fits all solution. So to what Paul was saying, it's just being open to the feedback. We're all in different journeys. We need to be respectful and not just say my way is the best way, not your way. Lots of strong emotions and polarizing opinions. And for me, it's been to be patient, to be open and understand where they're coming from. And, we need to be looking at our goal as we're looking at the youth, that these are our future leaders. We need to inform and educate and not impose viewpoints, perspectives, as long as it doesn't like the Scout oath and law. And I say this because how you view it in California versus Kentucky, you look at it, they may say, this is diversity. It's not where you're at one point, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. And from my personal experience, my husband is a white male. He's in his mid-50s, grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. His journey on diversity is a lot different than my journey as a Hispanic woman in my mid-50s versus my children who are mixed. Their journey is different. So we all have different journeys, and I'm still going through the journey. Even as a minority, I'm learning. Just because you're a minority doesn't mean you're the expert on every journey and you understand everything. There's things that I'm learning that are pointed out to me, and it's thankful to volunteers like Hans and Sangeeta and Tony who have helped me look and ask questions and say, did you think about this? Did you look at that? So there are the learnings, and just be open to change and being resilient. And as Sangeeta said, I end with these quotes because I think you all as individuals make the change, and you're doing changes in your council or in your areas. It eventually is going to rise up, but as leaders too, that helps for people to say, and for me especially, to say, look what Tony's done, or look what Sangeeta's done, or look what Natalie has done. You're making the change. And so it does matter what you all are doing. I cannot stress to you that every individual and their journey and really helping out and making sure everyone understands this is how it works in the bottom. Because I'm here in Irving, I don't see everything that's going on in the field. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Elizabeth. So we were going to do a second breakout session and talk about, BSA and volunteers, but I think we've had quite a bit of a discussion on that. So Elizabeth, would you like to talk a little bit about what would you say to the Scouts? Because at the end of the day, I think we can all agree. Do you want to stop sharing your screen, Elizabeth? At the end of the day, I think we can all agree that we're in this for the youth. We want to provide an environment where the youth can learn the skills that we want them to learn just to be prepared for life. So if you were to talk directly to the Scouts themselves, what message would you want to convey to them?
I want to let them know that this program is for them and that we see their differences, we value their differences, and we want them to feel included in these programs because they are future leaders and they are making changes. That is just so important because I know that's what I want to feel for my children. Everyone wants for their children. This program has so many things to offer and opportunities for children. The example of Noah Harris is just key. And there's lots of examples all throughout the country of what Scouting has done for many of us.
So I would agree with that. I think that, I see in my own kids the lessons that they have learned and what they have brought to Scouting. So my son was the historian when coronavirus hit last year. And so when we had our Court of Honor in June, the movie that he made for our troop was look at all these great activities we did in January, February, and the beginning of March. And then literally visually in the middle of his film, he said, coronavirus stopped us. And you see the music come to, that screeching sound where it halts. And then he said, but we're scouts and we persevere. So here's what we've been doing since Corona kept us at home. And he went on to talk about online merit badges, online rank advancements, trail to first class that was done, all these different things that they did. So the youth themselves are internalizing a lot of these messages about perseverance and about being prepared for life. And his take was very much, scouting prepares me for life. And here, this is something that life threw at us as a country, as a world. And what are we going to do about it? How are we going to persevere through it? So I think these are really, for me at least as a mother, I see these lessons that, are being taught to our youth. So what I'd like to have everyone do is maybe share 1 to 2 ideas about what BSA nationally could be doing to promote specific examples, to give feedback to Elizabeth to take back and to put into overarching national strategy. Is what are some examples of what BSA could be doing for our scouts? And you can be as tactical as you want, or you can be as strategic as you want. So who would like to start?
I can. Go ahead.
There you go.
I was just going to say, putting on my parent hat, I also am, a parent to a 7-palmed autistic eagle, and he was asked to speak at a diversability event, and we were able to hear from him and another neurodivergent. I don't like using the word special needs because it's kind of pedantic, especially, if you're talking about, older scouts, and asking them to speak. Let's hear it from them. Let's hear their voices, not experts from an ivory tower. And one thing he said is that he enjoyed scouting because it gave him a safe space to fail. And I think that was so wonderful. And he was asked, if you could tell a leader how to work with a scout that has an additional need, he said, let me try to fail, don't hover. Let me learn the courage to say, I need help, because I need to learn how to be a self-advocate. I'm not always going to have a leader or mom at my shoulder to say, oh, try it this way. So give me the chance to fail. Give me the opportunity to find my courage, to find my voice, to say, I need help. And that's where he said he learned the best from those leaders to help him talk to a boss or talk to somebody to say, hey, this is what I need. This is an accommodation. This is under the ADA. As a 17-year-old, as a 21-year-old, going through, let's teach those skills.
That's a great point.
Yes.
Make it cool. So I don't know if it's a badge or a pizza party or how you guys make stuff cool in Boy Scouts, but make it cool to stick up for each other, or to have courage and point something out like, hey, this person's not treating this person fairly. Make it cool to admit your mistakes. My husband's on this call, he'll tell you, we both grew up in households where it wasn't safe to be wrong. Either you actually got spanked pretty bad if you made a mistake, or it was trial by, this big lecture. It wasn't a culture in our household to make mistakes. So as adults, both of us are constantly trying to be right and are scared of being wrong. And we teach that to our kids. I think if we teach kids, it's okay that you made a mistake and own it. And you're actually a more powerful leader if you do own your mistakes and your flaws. So somehow make that cool or reward that process with them. And then somehow make it cool to be different, to celebrate differences or to recognize differences. I don't know how the merit system is, but that you guys know that. But I think that's great advice for not just the Boy Scouts, but for all of us on this call that are parents, because the heart of this series is getting to practical tools that help us. Hopefully our kids aren't having this conversation in 50 years from now. Hopefully we learn how to course correct. And I think some of these things are tips and advice that could help our kids not repeat the same things we're in.
This is Hans. I would say, spotlight real stories like Noah Harris. Incredible story about him, and there's so many. I think around the country, it makes it real. The younger the individual, the better. But there's also some incredible stories throughout scouting lore. I shared a video with Elizabeth about Secretary Norman Mineta and Senator Alan Simpson. If you guys have not seen that video, I highly recommend it. Just Google Senator Simpson, Secretary Mineta, Heart Mountain, Wyoming. It's an incredible story. And spotlighting stories about real life experiences that highlight diversity and scouting values and how they intersect.
And leadership, leadership, right? Those are stories you're talking about that are leadership.
Diversity, yes, exactly. Diversity is, in my mind, is being part of a leader. It's an action. It just does. Diversity doesn't happen. Leaders have to make it happen. And then I would say, just administratively, every time I participate in a discussion like this, I learn something. So that just tells me that the discussion around diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging is a evolving one. I mean, you could just look at the label, right? It used to be diversity and inclusion. Now it's DEI, now it's DEIB. And so in terms of rolling out the BSA merit badge and program, I would just say, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Let's get it out there and facilitate these discussions in our councils, in our districts, and in our units, and know that we have tons of people around, like you all, that are going to help evolve this discussion to make sure it stays relevant.
Absolutely. I would agree with that with the merit badge. I know that there's been a lot of talk on the merit badge, but we can't make it perfect that it's going to work for every single person, every single volunteer, every single scout across the country. So let's get out a version of it. And merit badges are updated all the time. Right. So let's get out a version. Let's put it out there. Let's then give feedback, and we can always update it. So anybody else? Would you like to give some ideas to Elizabeth?
Tony has his hand.
Sangeeta, you just mentioned something there, which and I sort of meld what has also been said relative to the merit badge. When it gets out there, it may not be perfect, but that gives us an opportunity to basically perhaps to fail on occasion and to take corrective action, which is part of DEIB, because none of us are perfect. And to the extent that we can find ways to, if you will, recognize shortcomings, the church I belong to, one of the things one of the sessions they're doing right now is it's called Sacred Ground, a dialogue circle, basically trying to get people to recognize, you have inherent bias, whether you know it or not. And being able to step back and make that recognition, and then, if you will, take the corrective action to move forward. It gets back to some of the things I've said before about flexibility and working to a common good.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I just wanted to say, I think you have to include the scouts and solutions in the discussion. I think we had a troop that my two boys belonged to, and they had a scout that was deaf and also had cerebral palsy. And so it was like, okay, we're going camping. How are we going to make this work? And they would come up with some amazing solutions, and it was a buy-in to understand, okay, we need to include everybody. So how are we going to make sure that everybody is included? And it was amazing to watch what they came up with. So I think it's important that we ask them for their help and for their what they have to say about it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
This is more of a concern probably than the other side of this conversation, and also kind of aimed at Elizabeth. The Key 3+2s on the NSTs have been going through a lot of effort to recruit the right people to be the leads. I know in NST3, we went through a lot of discussion, which ended up with Sangeeta becoming the lead for DEI in this territory, or NST3. My biggest concern, though, is what direction is being given to councils, because every council is supposed to have a representative, a DEI representative that's going to be working, in this case, in NST3 with Sangeeta. I don't think there's been a lot of discussion with the councils. In fact, it's not that I don't think, I know.
You know.
Because as Cindy Basham will tell you, who's in Area 4 as a council commissioner, which happens to be where I am right now, is I bring it up every month that our councils need to be seriously looking at these leads and getting the right person in the job. But I don't see that message coming down from the National Council. And I get a lot of different communications, and that isn't one of them.
No, and you're correct. So I have not been involved as much with the NST because that's coming from Patrick Sherritt as a COO. So that's one of the changes of getting an understanding. And that's where I think like Sangeeta and the different leads under DEI are going to make sure we get the right lead, because I'm up here thinking I thought that was done and then not. One of the things I did do as a chief diversity officer is work with Patrick and tell him, look, I pushed out to volunteers like Sangeeta and some other, even Hansley. I said, here's some opportunities and here's what I'm looking at. But yeah, you're right. Our communication isn't there. I think we're going too fast sometimes and not taking a step back, and we think we communicate and we haven't. So that's where I know that I'm looking to Sangeeta and all the NST DEI leads in every region to really have conversations with the local councils to make sure they understand what's going to happen and what's going on.
Yeah. For example, we have a conference coming up at the end of at Philmont at the end of June, and it's primarily geared for transitioning from the region area approach to the NST structure, and how councils are going to be involved in that and relate to that. Again, I'm on the planning committee for that, and it's Elizabeth, I need to talk to you on the side, because
yeah, that's perfect. Yeah,
there's a component missing in that, and this just popped up in my mind. I've been making all kinds of notes on it. So you too, Tony.
I think that Rick's brought up an important point, is that if we, as the lead, we can go and talk to the councils, but I think if some guidance comes from national, so this would be an action item for you probably, right, is to send out some kind of communication to the council that this is what our role as leads, for all the leads, not just the DEI lead, but all the leads. This is what their role is, and this is how we expect you to work with them. So I think Rick's got a very good tactical suggestion for you.
No, and that's good. And that's one of the other things, y'all, like this organization, the role where I've been more prominent, and Roger, our CEO, is very much, is really making sure that people understand DEI is just not one perspective. It's looking at every area. And I think that's where I'm trying to get I'm getting my colleagues to get on board to help me understand, like, you're doing that, but let me know what you're doing. So that's something new. The corporations have been dealing with it and they struggle with that, but this is a new way of looking at DEIB. It's like we're looking at everything, not just one piece, everything. So I will look to that and make sure. I know we have a meeting next week on that. So yes, please reach out to me.
This needs to be a fundamental message to Scout executives, and I'm talking about local council Scout executives.
Okay. Yeah. We have about 5 more minutes to give ideas and suggestions to Elizabeth, and then we're going to need to wrap up. So anyone else have some thoughts for Elizabeth about tactical or strategic things that BSA can be doing to move this conversation along? Don't be shy.
I would say we have to ensure that not only information getting to council, but getting to the local unit. I know communication is always a burden because, unit leaders change and I don't do this anymore. Or this unit, no longer is, active, but trying to ensure that those communication pathways are open and that it's okay to say, I disagree. And we need to have some way to flag units that maybe due to their charter org are not welcoming to this or or different particular DEI factors, which charter orgs do have that control, and that's okay. But maybe they say, maybe they're able to say, okay, you're a trans youth, and this unit might be better suited to you, instead of saying, oh, you're not welcome here because we don't want you. And having a way to say that alternative unit in a way that's respectful to both parties.
Well, I think, Natalie, I agree with you on that it is, another unit might be more welcoming, but I think we also have to set some guidelines for the original unit as to why you're not welcoming this scout. So for example, I look at, and Elizabeth, I've shared this with you, that just in our local area, we have within a mile or two apart, we have units who have very different views on girls being part of scouting. And so I think it's not just finding a unit that's welcoming, but also talk to the original unit and say, what is the issue with the scout being welcome here? Because this is part of our scouting journey, is that we welcome all scouts. So what is it that, on what grounds are you not welcoming this scout? What is your thought process? Let me understand where you're coming from so that we can work this out.
Yeah, the ones that I've traditionally faced is with the LGBT community and charter organizations that are run by a religious institution that do not embrace that. Right. So, and again, we want to be respectful of all parties, but if they do get a lead to say, hey, this trans scout with her 2 moms is interested in joining, instead of just not answering the call or whatever, know that it's okay to say maybe this might be a better fit. In the same way that if a scout called me and said, hey, I'm not free on Wednesdays to go to your meetings, is there another unit that you know of that meets on Monday? Sure, here you go. Like, try to open the net as wide as possible to get as many youth involved.
Okay, great.
Agreed. And then I just wanted to say, when Hans was talking about the youth, that is something that I've looked at. We tend to focus more on the adults, but we're finalizing the training for the volunteers. And one of the things I thought is, we need to remember this is about the youth. So I asked Noah Harris, I asked different scouts with different backgrounds to talk about what scouting means to them. They're not using, hey, I know what DEIB, they're talking about what scouting meant to them. So it resonates to hear the youth, because it really makes a difference. Whatever your viewpoints are, if you look, you're like, I want to be in a position. As adults, we're like, yes, we want youth. We love our youth. We want them to be something different than we are, be better than who we are as we now. Look, all the things we're seeing, I can tell you, I'm seeing this having college-age daughters. I have a daughter that dealt with bullying, and it's issues where every organization is dealing with, from the workplace. You all work at different workplaces, from colleges to schools. It's not just a scouting problem. It's just how to have those conversations, how to address issues. It's hard on when I see people having to address it, and not everyone's equipped to have those discussions. And so that's part of the training that we're going to continue to do, working with Sangeeta, having more training later on. This first training is an initial training, a foundational one. It's not going to resolve everything. It's not going to talk about everything. It's just a start into what everyone's saying. We don't have to be perfect. That's one of our things I've seen in scouting. Perfect is we always want to be perfect. We can't be perfect in scouting. We're going to have to take some changes. And as Tony's saying, we may need to fail and pick up our pants and say, here we go, or whatever. So anyways.
You can't be perfect anywhere. I think we all need to stop trying to do that.
I agree with you. Elizabeth, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share? And then we'll go ahead and wrap it up.
I just wanted to say thank you. And again, when I hear the volunteers, youth volunteers wanting the changes, I mean, it inspires me. It's about the youth. I have daughters. This program is essential for society, sports, and it just reinforces what, to do the right thing. And that we don't give up, and that we help each other out. We pull, thanks to volunteers like Sangeeta, who's helped me. She's been on this journey with me for a year. I've had some times where I'm like frustrated on how we're trying to move things. I just want to say thank you. And it's volunteers like you that make the change and inspire me to continue forward.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing all of this with us, for listening to our thoughts and taking them back to national and trying to kind of take everyone's thoughts and meld them into a new direction for us. So thank you all for participating. I really appreciated everyone's candor and, having this opportunity to talk with Elizabeth very candidly and openly about what our experience as scouting parents and volunteers has been. Given the hardships that so many people are still facing in our country today, Mariah and I will be making a donation to a local food bank as our thank you to Elizabeth, and also for BSA for taking the time today to share everything that we've experienced. This session was recorded, and the recording will be made available probably by the end of the week or beginning of next week. We will send everyone a link. Please feel free to share that link. I know there was a lot of people who wanted to join us today and were not able to do so. Please join us on Wednesday, June 15th for our next session, which is going to be on how to mitigate the impact of race and gender in our classrooms. That will be with Dr. Rebecca Dupas. Thank you for joining us again today. And if anyone has any last minute things, we have a couple minutes left, 2 minutes left, that they would like to say. Mariah, do you have something?
All of our past series have been recorded and are on the website too. So if you're just now learning about us and want to check out our other series, go to the website and they're all on there. We're also looking for ideas. So if anyone wants to email us and say, hey, I would really love to hear a talk about X, we're very nimble and we want to keep this our discussion. So let us know what you all want to hear.
Absolutely.
I just want to make one more suggestion, which is that as you roll out the training and target the various leaders and all the way down to the unit level, that you target the scoutmasters. I mean, this has to be at that. You can't have a diversity person in the troop. It's not the right message. It has to be the scoutmaster, in my opinion.
I was going to pick it at the same time that we have that, to pull in some information to our SPLs as well, because that's our youth leader within the org too. So if there is a learning bundle for the Scoutmaster, maybe something in that PLC handbook or something that as an SPL they should be aware of, and some tools there as well.
Well, I think there it's something similar to It Happened to Me, right? Where we have for bullying, develop a program to develop sensitivity. I think they're actually more sensitive to it than we as adults are. But it's having something for them as well. So, but it's age appropriate. It's designed to connect it in the ways that they communicate. Just like having something and training for the leaders. I think much like YPT, having it mandatory training sends the best signal. If you can get that, I'm not sure making it required like YPT is going to be accepted by everyone, but I would love to see this diversity inclusion training required for everyone. And so you're level setting the understanding, that optional aspect that you mentioned earlier, Elizabeth.
There's a great, from the WSM for the World Jamboree, everyone had to take the Safe from Harm course, right, which had really such amazing content. So maybe that's a resource we could leverage.
These are good ideas. Thank you. And again, I would ask, and a lot of you have reached out to me individually, and I appreciate that. Continue to. I don't know everything, so I'm learning myself. And so that's a good thing and it's a bad thing, because I don't know all the volunteers, but I also have a different viewpoint. So I'm not set in ways. I'm like, that's interesting. I never thought about that. So I am open, can't always make changes right away, but I hear what you're saying about the troops, about asking the youth, about the different guidelines we can do. So thank you for sharing. And Rick, please reach out to me so we can touch base. And again, those are things that I don't know, that where I see the NSTs and I see leads like you and volunteers bringing to my attention. Do you know what's going on? Because again, I'm over here in Irving, not on the ground, especially with COVID, not traveling, and we don't have the money for that, where I look to you as volunteers to tell me this is what's actually going on. Elizabeth, do you understand that? I see it from the employment perspective to what Natalie is saying, different people have mentioned, and I step in where I am. But if it's not brought to my attention, or I'm not seeing the big issues, I don't know what I don't know. So thank you all. I appreciate this discussion. It was very good, open.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for joining us today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll send you the link. And I hope to continue this discussion maybe at a later date.
Yeah. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.